Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining this very important session. This session is about responsibility sharing, which is the defining principle of the Global Compact on Refugees affirmed by the United Nations General Assembly in 2018. And this principle is a testament to the recognition that the predicament of refugees and host communities is a common responsibility of mankind. As unfortunately refugee situations increase in scope, scale and complexity, and an increasing number of refugees require protection, assistance and solution, the international community is committed to lighten the burden on host countries to make sure that they are in a better position to provide protection and assistance to refugees. This high-level event, hosted on the occasion of the Global Refugee Forum, is co-organized by UNHCR and the Hashemite government of the Kingdom of Jordan, and it is an opportunity to explore how states, development banks, and the private sector have worked collaboratively to translate the Global Compact on Refugees into action. And our discussion will center on a number of points: how host governments discharge their responsibility as they welcome refugees, how the international community supported major hosting countries in the MENA region over the past decade in response to the Syria situation and new emerging crises, what more needs to be done in light of increasing global displacement, reduced funding, and impact of climate change, which new actors should be called upon to support host countries through funding, material, as well as technical support to both refugees and host population. And finally, I'm sure we will discuss the need for an increased involvement of development actors to the response to forced displacement. And I would like to take this opportunity to commend Jordan and Lebanon for their remarkable hosting of refugee communities, noting that there are 15.6 million displaced and stateless in the MENA region, among them 6 million Syrians. And I would like to also commend Germany, not only as a key donor for the region, but also as the third largest host country globally, supporting 2.5 million refugees, predominantly from Syria. So before giving you the floor, Excellency Minister Safadi, allow me to thank the Kingdom of Jordan for its leadership role as one of the co-conveners of the second Global Refugee Forum. Excellency, you have the floor.
Good morning, good afternoon to you all, and thank you so much for the opportunity. I cannot but start with the warning against another displacements that's happening as we meet. The horrific situation in Gaza, the continuation of the Israeli aggression on Gaza, the systematic measures being taken by Israel to uproot Palestinians from their home is happening as we speak. 1.9 million Palestinians have already been displaced from their homes in Gaza, and after they've been displaced, Israel systematically destroyed their houses, destroyed the streets, destroyed every building that is there. That can only point to what is really happening, which is creating conditions under which the displaced person cannot go back even after this blatant aggression stops. The area to which Gazans have been pushed simply cannot sustain them. It does not have the infrastructure, it doesn't have the capacity, it doesn't have the health facilities, it doesn't have schools, it doesn't have the makings of life in that area. So we're seeing another major forced population displacements taking place, and unfortunately the international community has not yet been able to call it what it is, which is a blatant aggression, a war crime that will only push people towards leaving their ancestral land. So I just had to start with that and warn against the continuation of this aggression, which thus far has killed over 18,000 people, 8,000 children among them. The majority of those killed, over almost 70%, are women and children. So the claim to self-defense does not stand. It's belied by reality on the ground. It's belied by the murderous activities that we see unfolding in Gaza. And we also are seeing taking place on the West Bank, where systematic incursions are taking place into Palestinian communities. Over 300 settlers attacks on Palestinians since October 21st. And again, all this is taking place against a very apocalyptic humanitarian situation. Since October 21st, only 3,500 trucks of supplies entered Gaza. By UNRWA's estimates, Gazans need 800 trucks per day. So basically, in almost 2 months, we've seen only enough supplies coming in for 5 days. And that, again, is a war crime that needs to be called out. And the world cannot remain silent against an aggression that is killing Palestinians, destroying their livelihood, and pushing the region into the abyss of further conflict. The amount of hatred being generated by this war, as I said earlier, will define generations. That is not a country that seeks peace. That's a country that is creating every condition for further conflict. That said, I'm sorry I had to start with this, because it is the challenge with which we're doing, and it does have implications, even though UNHCR is not directly involved with UNRWA in charge, but it does create a major refugee situation for UNRWA, which has thus far lost over 130 of its staff and is screaming for the world to come and do what they need to do to provide the necessity, life-sustaining needs of Palestinians. There's one shower unit for every 600 Palestinians. There's one toilet for every 200 Palestinians. With no medicine, with no hospitals, with winter upon us, disease is going to break out. So that's another challenge that the whole UN infrastructure will have to face, and it's crumbling in the face of the enormity of the challenge that we're seeing. On the issue of refugees and the issue of burden sharing, also, unfortunately, we're seeing a shift. The international community is no longer shouldering the responsibility the way it should. There are some among our partners who are still doing their share, and we appreciate that, and we value the contribution that they make. But the facts on the ground tell a story that is extremely alarming. There's more and more cuts of funds needed to provide refugees with a dignified life. The burden is shifting on host countries alone, and I think that breaks the moral contract between the donor community and the host countries at the beginning of the Syrian crisis, where host countries do their share and the international community does their share as well. We're seeing less attention being given to refugees, and the challenge of refugee 11, 12 years into the Syrian crisis is not getting easier. On the contrary, it's getting even more. In Jordan, we host about 1.3, 1.4 million Syrians, only 10% of whom live in refugee camps. 90% are spread in every city, town, and village in the country. 50% of them are under 15 years of old, which means they never really knew their country, and their needs are not those of immediate relief. They need schools, they need universities, and they need jobs. In the kingdom, we're doing everything we possibly can to provide them with a dignified life. We provide the same treatment to Syrians as we do Jordanians when it comes to education, to health services. About 155,000 Syrian kids go to our schools. 200 schools are operating on 2-shift basis in order to be able to accommodate their needs. We've given over 425,000 job permits to Syrians at a time when our unemployment is about 24%. But we do that because we believe these are victims of war. They cannot be victimized by the world overseeing, ignoring their needs. So we believe it's a duty, but we also believe it is an investment in the future. Because if we give refugees the dignified life that they deserve, if we invest in their education, if we give them hope, then they will be the generation that will rebuild their country when the time for that comes. But if we abandon them to hate, to need, to bitterness, to ignorance, then we're creating a bigger problem for the future. UNHCR is cutting its services to refugees in Jordan, and I'm sure in Lebanon as well. World Food Programme is cutting its services significantly as well, cutting subsidies, cutting direct support. Our own response plan to refugees in 2016, I believe we got about 64% funding for the plan. In 2017, we got 64%. In this year, we only got 22.3%. And that points to a trend where there is less and less attention being given to the Syrian refugees. The unfortunate reality that we see is that once a new crisis erupts, the one before is forgotten. And one of the reasons why we've seen less and less attention being given to the Syrian refugees is because of the legitimate concern with the Ukrainian crisis as well. We do believe that Ukrainian refugees do deserve to be given all that they need to sustain their lives, but we're saying that cannot be at the expense of the Syrian refugees. That said, against this backdrop where, again, little attention is being given, little fund is being sent the way of refugees and host countries, the burden is being shouldered by host countries alone. And there's a capacity. In Jordan, we are way above capacity. We've done everything we possibly can to provide refugees with a dignified life, as I said, but the challenge is mounting, and given the economic challenges that we're facing as a country, we don't want to come to a point where we have to choose whether we have to give the last remaining seat in a classroom to a Syrian or to a Jordanian. Because if we get to that point, then it's shame on all of us. It's shame on the whole international community. We have to all come together, share the burden, because we invest, again, in the right of people to live with dignity, with opportunity. To our colleagues in Europe as well, I might just want to add that there's a tremendous concern with migration to Europe. And I keep saying you're not going to stop migration by building walls. People are going to do what they have always done. They're going to seek better opportunities. They're going to seek life for their children. The only way to stop migration is, first of all, the most important thing is to solve conflicts that push people out of their home. But secondly, until that happens, invest in providing refugees with a decent life in their neighborhood. That is what's going to stop migration. But just building walls and aggressive policies is not going to do it. This has been the lesson of history that we've all need to learn from. Obviously, not enough attention is being given to solving the Syrian crisis. It became a status quo politics, just living with the crisis. Those far away can do that. We, on the borders of Syria, we cannot afford to that, because the impact of the continuation of the crisis continues to pose tremendous challenges to us. Only 3 days ago, we lost a soldier, and another one was wounded by smugglers who tried to smuggle drugs and weapons into Jordan. We've seen an uptick in those operations, and we're not talking about regular gangs here. There are these, but there's also a systematic effort supported by organized group. The military capacity that the smugglers have point to the fact that they are getting tremendous support that obviously we will not sit idle against. We will do whatever it takes to protect our interests, to protect our people, and we will go after those who threaten our national security wherever they are. And that's a message that we're making very firmly and very clearly. I will think my time is up, so I will just sum up by saying we cannot let down refugees. They are victims of conflict. We cannot victimize them again by ignoring them. But that responsibility cannot be shouldered by host countries alone. It is a global responsibility. All must do their bit. As far as Jordan is concerned, we're going to continue to do everything within our means to give them the life that they deserve, give them a shot at a decent life. But I'm just saying we cannot do it alone. The rest have come and do their share. And if we do not, everybody will suffer the consequences, because nothing justifies abandoning 1.3 million Syrians in Jordan and as many or even more or Lebanon or elsewhere. So I think this conference could be an opportunity just to refocus attention We are dealing with real people. We are dealing with real needs. They are not just numbers. They are mothers, their fathers, their children. And we owe them to do everything we possibly can to make sure that they get a shot at a decent life. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Excellency. You made your introductory statement and you actually started the panel discussion already at the same time. You will be followed by Mr. Abdallah Abu Habib, the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Lebanon, then by Mr. Nils Annen, who is the Parliamentary Secretary of State in the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development of the Federal Republic of Germany, and by Mr. Jean-Christophe Carré, who is the Country Director for the Middle East Department, World Bank. Minister, we know that you have to leave at 2 o'clock, but longer you can stay, the better. He's excellent. Very good.
To the last second I can.
But we take note of the very strong point that you made on Gaza, and this is what the Secretary General has been insisting on: humanitarian ceasefire and provision of humanitarian assistance to the population in Gaza, and the pressure must continue for it to happen. And we also note your point on the hatred that this situation is spreading all around the world. We also hear you when you said that when the Syria crisis started, there was moral conversation that took place and a decision that was taken saying that the international community would mobilize the resources necessary as countries were receiving Syrian refugees, and that has to continue, meaning humanitarian assistance has to continue, and we are seeing it going down. We also realize the economic challenges that a number of countries in the region are experiencing, and the migratory movements that we're seeing increasing as a result of this situation. But Excellency Minister Abdallah Abu Habib, you have the floor.
Thank you, and thanks for the organizers, whether it's UNHCR or the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. And, Lebanon, first let me say I can't add a word to what my colleague, my friend Ayman has said to you on the Palestinian issue. I will just a little bit talk, or the Syrian issue as well. Both countries face the same problems that any country with so many people, so many refugees in its midst. Lebanon has received since 2011 all kind of refugees from Syria, all kind of income level people. We have the business people, and we have also the poor people that came running away from the war. They are victims of the war, as His Excellency has said. And they are in our schools, they're in our hospitals if they need, they are in our, a lot of them are working and renting houses and so on. Now, but we reach a point in Lebanon whereby things are becoming, very difficult, and especially that we see that the situation in Syria is getting quieter and quieter. So I visited Syria twice this last year, and we had very long discussions with the Syrians, and I had discussions with the director of UNHCR and director of the humanitarian coordinator. Well, both UN guys said that situation in Syria is quiet. It's safe, it's secure, as long as you don't go to the borders where others are in. Where on the borders in the north or in the east of Syria. And they both said that 90% of the Syrians are under poverty line. And that Syria, what the officials also said that they're going for, because of the sanctions, they're going for self-sufficiency in agriculture, and they need the labor as well there. But the labor is better off in Beirut or in Amman. The reasons that they're being paid, although with less and less from UNHCR, or subsidized by WFP, also with less and less, they still are better off in Lebanon than in Syria, and in Amman better than in Syria. So we have a problem now, and Lebanon, as you all know, is facing very difficult economic and political situation. It is, so far, we haven't solved any of these issues. And, although schools are being crowded, we still, with some assistance from various donors, we are able to open schools, have 2 shifts, as in Jordan, have 2 shifts, and also give them they are better off now. A lot of them are better off going to the hospitals than Lebanese are, because of the economic difficulty that the Lebanese face. We're really afraid that we may reach a situation that we cannot control. We just before the Gaza situation erupted, there were a lot of problems between the low-income Syrians and low-income Lebanese. And the state is trying to solve them all the time. It's a very difficult situation that we have. Now, with the budgets going down, as the UNHCR said yesterday, $400 million deficit in the budget, and with what's going on in Ukraine and now Gaza and so on, we know that the situation is going to be very limited. The help is going to be very limited in Lebanon or in Jordan. So we need to really think out of the box. We need to have a solution. If you were waiting for a solution, political solutions that enable them to go back, I say first that they are not political refugees. They are economic refugees. They are social refugees, but not political. No one of them, no group of them threatens the regime in Syria. And if we're waiting for a political committee in order to change the constitution, whatever it is, it doesn't seem to be going in the right direction. So we are faced with a situation as is. Yesterday we had a good discussion with UNHCR. And we proposed to UNHCR to start a pilot project, take 5 or 6 villages, and have the people of these villages, whether they are in Lebanon or in Jordan, pay them in Syria. We guarantee that none of them would be has any security problem in Syria. We have to find out that first, and help them rebuild their villages, because in Syria they have no jobs, and in Syria they have no homes. If they going to go from a camp or a tent in Lebanon or in Jordan to Syria, they prefer to be in Lebanon or Syria under these circumstances. So at least they get some work, and they do work in Lebanon, especially male Syrians. They easily find a work. So this pilot project, if UNHCR agrees to it, it was agreed in principle, but not final. This would help us in the future, although it would be very, very, very small. It would help us in the future get them back to Syria. And the Syrians, they welcome such kind of things. They welcome such that they think that very few Syrians have problems with the government. And those who have problems with the government, they can solve it before they come, and they will help them through the government concerned, whether it is Jordan or Lebanon, or through UNHCR. And one thing also, that we have a lot of Syrian born in Lebanon that are Bedoons, without any citizenship. And this is also, we need UNHCR help to register them. And here again, the Syrians agreed that they accept registering these Syrians in the embassies, whether it's in Lebanon or in Syria, or sorry, in Jordan. So we have to start acting on the issue. We cannot leave it like this. We have to start thinking out of the box, really, not regularly get money and feed them where they are. Lebanon is 5 million people. 1 million of us is outside Lebanon now, in Europe, in the Gulf, in Africa. So we have 4 million, 2 million, at least 2 million refugees, Syrians and Palestinians. So we have a very big problem, and we really need to think out of the box in order to solve this problem. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Excellency Minister Bouhabib. I think you've been very clear, and we all know Lebanon being one of the countries which has the highest percentage of its population being refugees. We all know how difficult the situation is, and they have both politically and economically, and we really want to take this opportunity to, again, praise Lebanon for having received so many refugees for such a long time. The point that you're making on repatriation is indeed for refugees the most ideal solution. We have to just make sure that it is voluntary and that it takes place in conditions of safety and dignity, and that it is sustainable. And you've said it, for refugees to be able to go back to their places of origin, they need to have access to basic services, and so long as we are not in a position of providing these basic services, it makes the return difficult, and it makes it difficult to make it sustainable. But you've had, as you said, conversation with the High Commissioner, and we are at your disposal to, as you said, think out of the box in making sure that we help finding solutions. I know, Minister, that you have to leave soon. I'm looking at the ambassador. We have another 5 minutes. So if you allow me, I'll give the floor to Mr. Niels Annen. Germany is both a country which is hosting a large number of refugees, I think number 3 in the world, and at the same time, one of the countries that is providing the most support, the most financial support to refugees around the world. It's also a country which has a huge experience in inclusion, in making sure that refugees are included in the society. So, Mr. Annen, we would like to hear from you. Also, having heard intervention from the Deputy Prime Minister from Jordan and the Minister from Lebanon, to hear from you also your thoughts on how we should move forward. Mr. Annen, you have the floor.
I just need to take my leave because I have a plane to catch. I just want to say thank you so much for putting this together. And I want to thank Germany in particular for their commitment to helping refugees. And they're a country, as my colleague said, they hosted, but they're also extremely supportive. And I think they're one of the major donors that continue to honor the commitment. So I'm grateful for that. And again, UNHCR, World Bank, other UN institutions are partners. We see them as such. It is our partnership that will allow us to really fulfill our moral, humanitarian duty towards refugees who, again, cannot be abandoned. They are people with real needs. They are people who've suffered, and unless we all come together and address their needs, we will not be able to fulfill our duty towards them. Obviously, I agree that the future of refugees must be in their country. Hence is our effort to try and bring about a solution to the Syrian crisis that would allow for the creation of conditions that are conducive for the safe and voluntarily return to refugees to go back. But until then, we all have a responsibility. Jordan will honor that responsibility, and we look forward to continuing to work with all our partners on doing what's right. We've done right by refugees, as I said before. I hope the rest of us do right by them as well. And I have to take my leave. I'm sorry, but I gotta go. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Annan, you have the floor.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, and I appreciate that the Minister took the time to join that very important panel. It's a great opportunity. I wish to thank the Chair for including me in this, and I want to come to the point of what Germany is doing in terms of support for refugees. I don't want to start another discussion which oversteps a little bit my boundaries here, as I'm not representing the German Foreign Office, but I do want to say that I think it's important, because we all look at what is happening in Gaza, and nobody is not touched by, you know, the images, the suffering, the incredible amount of victims. But if we have that discussion, I firmly believe it's important to mention what triggered that escalation. So we need to mention the attacks of Hamas and the victims on the Israeli side, which is not to say that we don't feel for every victim, but if we have a discussion here, that's important to put that as well on the table and in the context. And I don't think that anybody is surprised here that we believe that, of course, Israel has a right to defend itself, but we also strongly believe, we very strongly believe, that international law has to be applied.
I would like to call on everybody in this room to have full respect for all the 114,000 people who are displaced around the world. This is an opportunity here to have a conversation. We have a panel. Please give the panelists an opportunity to speak until they finish. We will open the floor later on for conversation and for reaction, but please allow them to speak. Mr. Annan,
Thank you
please
very
carry on.
much. And what I wanted to say is that we, of course, believe, and the government made it clear, that everything that is happening needs to happen under the basic principle of proportionality and respect for the international human right. And that's the point that I wanted to make. And I believe that that's the basis that we have that discussion. Then we can make progress together. The second point I wanted to make, and I thank the Chair for mentioning that in the moderation, is that Germany has had a unique experience, if I may frame it that way. Yes, we are proud that we are a reliable, steadfast donor for the international system. That is the UNHCR, but I explicitly and in that context want also to mention that this is also true for UNRWA, for the World Food Programme, and for other organizations. And what Minister Safadi said here, and he had, I think, all the right in the world to make a very important point here, because we understand the difficulties that the governments of Jordan and Lebanon are facing, is that we need to remind the world that just because you don't report about the crisis in Syria doesn't mean that it's disappearing, which is, by the way, also true for other regions in the world. And that is why Germany is continuing its support for Syrian refugees in the broader region. My ministry alone, in this year, has committed 510 million euros for that region in development aid and assistance. There's an additional 910 million euro for humanitarian assistance by the German government for Syria and the neighboring countries. And I think, you know, it's important to mention that not because I'm expecting, you know, a special gratitude for the German government, but because we believe that it's not only a humanitarian decision, it affects our own security, stability, and prosperity. And yes, we are all struggling under budgetary constraints. You can, I mean, it's not a secret. You can, you know, read it in the papers. We have a budget situation in Germany as well, but we will do everything within our means to remain that reliable partner. And there are many ordinary Germans, because Germany took, since 2015, opened its borders for more than 800,000 Syrian refugees. and refugees from Afghanistan, from Iraq. And you know that we now accepted more than 1 million refugees from Ukraine. So if we talk about the refugee situation, it's not a theoretical discussion for Germans, because they know from their communities that they welcome Syrian refugees, for example. And that's why many are still following the situation. And Minister Habib, you know, it's not the first time that we're having that conversation, and I appreciate everything you said, but I do have to mention that from the way we are looking at it, how the Syrian regime is behaving, your assessment that it's safe and secure except of some border region is not our assessment.
It's not my assessment.
Yeah, I want to say
It's
that.
UNHCR and
Yeah,
human
it's not our assessment. And I can tell you, out of 800,000 Syrians, there is only a couple of hundred Syrians who took the decision for voluntarily return to the country. Most of them returned from Syria because the Syrian regime is not willing and able to guarantee the minimum requirements for return, and not even the safety, because there are so many competing security agencies. You know, we don't expect the impossible from the Syrian government, but I do think that because we agree that everything you expect to happen is our expectation as well. But they have a responsibility to make sure that if people return, that they're not going to be recruited against their will into the army or into a militia, that they have access to their property, that they are unharmed. And there is no mechanism to assure that to this day. And I think we have to discuss about that. So Germany, with its political and financial commitment, offers our good offices and our cooperation to work with everybody in the region to make a contribution toward that point. But we don't see the conditions for that to this day. And my impression is also sometimes, if I'm listening, and that's my last point, if I'm listening to the speeches of President Assad, there's no indication that he wishes for his citizens to come back, because otherwise he would change his rhetoric and he would change the policies of his government. And I really hope that that is going to happen, but in the meanwhile, we need to, I think, respect the basic conditions for that return to be implemented, and I don't see them being implemented so far. Sorry for being a little longer here and giving me that opportunity, Mr. Chair, but I think it's an important discussion we are having here together, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Annen, and we'll give an opportunity to Mr. Habib to come back on this point, but first I would like to go to Mr. Jean-Christophe Carré from the World Bank. The World Bank has played, I would say, a very important role in dealing with forced displacement in this region. Yesterday evening, there was a very important conversation on the GCFF, which is the instrument that the World Bank has put in place to help support middle-income countries receiving a large number of refugees. So, Mr. Carré, if we can hear from you, what are the prospects and what more can be done by the World Bank and by international financial institutions, generally speaking, to respond to situations as difficult as the one you've heard from the Deputy Prime Minister from Jordan and the Minister from Lebanon. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting us to be part of this panel. So let me tell you about Jordan, the largest beneficiary of what we call the GCFF, the Global Concessional Financing Facility, and also about Lebanon and what has been accomplished in these two countries with these facilities. I would like in this panel to highlight 3 reasons why this facility, in our opinion, is a game changer when it comes to responding to the refugee crisis in these two countries. So first, in Jordan, every GCFF dollar has leveraged $6 in development loans from multi-development banks for refugees and host community. This is absolutely critical for Jordan, given its tight fiscal space. So it really makes a big difference. Second, The funds that are invested by GCFF are invested in development projects, both in Jordan and Lebanon, in complement to humanitarian assistance. But development, contrarily to humanitarian assistance, is a government-led process fostering policy reform and institutional building. In a nutshell, the GCFF has been able to translate forced displacement into a development gain. And let me give you a couple of examples. In Jordan, GCFF finance program, I've provided over 350,000 permits, work permits, for refugees to access jobs in sectors such as agriculture and digital, and they have also helped promote home-based businesses, especially for women. In Lebanon, the other country where GCFF is active, it has co-financed a secondary road maintenance project, which is creating jobs for Syrian refugees. We have created so far 1 million labor days for refugees, and Lebanese citizens are benefiting from enhanced accessibility of an additional 400 kilometers of secondary roads linking markets and opportunity in the whole country. We think also education, it's not only about jobs when you want to in terms of development, education matters a lot because the children, we want them to have a future. In both countries, GCFF is financing education services, and for example, in Jordan, it's almost 200,000 children that have benefited from education services through the GCFF. Last but not least, last example, we know that Jordan is already tremendously affected by climate change. The GCFF has invested in water services and drought management in the same governorates that we have a lot of refugees and promoted climate-smart infrastructure. So I wanted to give this, for example, to show that when GCFF is responding to the refugee crisis, it's really from a development angle, and it creates really economic development. Which brings to my last point, and maybe the most important one. As we discuss responsibility sharing between host countries and donors, we need to move from principles to practicalities. Together with our colleagues from UNHCR, we are developing, as we speak, economic tools to assess costs and benefits of hosting refugees. This will give us, the international community, numbers that can be used as a basis for discussion on responsibility sharing. And we believe at the World Bank that figures, data matters when it comes to policy discussion. I just want you to give one initial finding which we found striking. Our initial findings in Jordan shows that the annual cost of hosting refugees is cut by half because the government allows refugees to work, which is really significant knowing what is the annual cost of hosting refugees in Jordan. The same exercise is ongoing in Lebanon, and we will be able to present findings and policy recommendations for both countries early next calendar year. And I would like to thank my counterpart in both Jordan and Lebanon for their patience, because I know that they have been waiting for such a recommendation for quite some time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jean-Christophe Carré. Thank you very much. And indeed, the role of the bank has been exceptional, and very good to hear from you that we are going to continue to do the work of data, the work of research to make sure that we can inform the conversation on the impact of asylum on the communities and the societies. And Mr. Nan, I didn't conclude on your point, but really to thank again Germany for the exceptional role that you've played as an asylum country and as a number 2 funder of UNHCR and of refugee programs around the world. If you allow me, I'll give the last word to Minister Habib before we open the floor for statements that were agreed upon before this meeting. Mr. Habib, you have the floor.
Thank you. Allow me to say that I did not say that Syria is safe. I met for 2 hours in Damascus with the UNHCR director and humanitarian coordinator sent by the UN. And I asked this question, how safe? They said it is safe. I said, but I hear from ambassadors in Lebanon that it's not safe. Is there any report which says that it's safe? He said, both said, we haven't seen any report that says it's not safe when the government of Syria is in charge of the areas. And they said one more thing also about UNHCR director said. And since he said that 90% of Syrians are under poverty line, he said we are receiving cuts in the aid coming to Syria. Two of the largest ones are US and Germany. US is cutting 50% and Germany is cutting 30% of the aid coming to Syria. I just wanted to say this. And another thing is that, you know, we are with self-defense. Always, this is a human right, you know, I think it is self-defense. But self-defense should not be a license to kill and destroy. What happened is that, yes, the Arab League foreign ministers, they condemned the killing of civilians, whoever they are. Some here in this hall may not agree with me on this, but we think this is correct, that we should condemn the killing of civilians, whoever they are. But now, it's not a matter of killing of civilians. In Gaza, as Minister Ayman said, that this is really kind of, we don't know what it is really. You know, 1.9 out of 2.3 million people are refugees without tents, without anything there. They have no food, very scarce food, very little medicine, no hospitals, everything almost everything is destroyed. This is not self-defense. And I agree also with the Secretary General of the United Nations, who said, such things don't come from vacuum. There were so many UN resolutions to solve the Palestinian-Israeli problem. And it was Israel that is refusing to really solve them, to implement these resolutions. And now you read it in all papers that this government or the various governments of Mr. Netanyahu was helping Hamas to weaken the Palestinian Authority, because Palestinian Authority means two-state solution. So really we have to say things as they are and not, you know, really kind of, oh, yes, I agree with His Excellency that we should not kill civilians. This is correct. Fully, the whole Arab foreign ministers agreed on that. But it doesn't mean that we go killing and destroying and kind of trying to send them to another country. Same thing in the West Bank. Now the settlers are armed and they're using it and they're killing Palestinians also. Again, more than 300 Palestinians were killed. Sorry, I took that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency. On your second point, I would like to refer us back to the positions that the Secretary General has been taken on behalf of the international community on the situation in Gaza. My second point, on the return, I would broaden the notion of security and safety to human security and safety, which actually includes access to basic services. And the context that we are seeing now is such that in terms of human security, human safety, and ability of people to go back to Syria, there still seems to be some road and some way. I would like to thank all of you. We'll now move to the statements. I first have His Excellency Dr. Ahmed Ihab Gamal Bedin, the Ambassador Permanent Representative of the Arab Republic of Egypt to Geneva. Then we'll have Mr. Michael Koller, who is the Deputy Director General of DG ECHO. Then we'll have Ms. Charlotte Slente, who is the Secretary General of the Danish Refugee Council. Then we'll have Ms. Enam Barishi, Director General of the Jordan River Foundation and board member of the Jordan Civil Society Network for Displacement, and then Mr. Ahmed Al-Ruhaimi, who is the Director of External Affairs of the Qatar Charity, Then we'll have Mr. Christian Cardon, who is the Chief Protection Officer of the ICRC. Then we will have Mr. Abdi Abdullahi, who is the manager at the Islamic Development Bank, Resilience and Fragility Department. Mr. Abdallah Yusuf, Head of Strategy and Program Departments, the Big Heart Foundation. Mr. Fouad Fouad, Chair of Force Displacement Program, the American University of Beirut. Mr. Mohamed Sharif Mohamed, founder of HITMA Organization for Cultural and Social Development. And lastly, Ms. Catherine Osborne, Policy Advisor, Force Displacement Crisis Bureau, United Nations Development Program, UNDP. So, as you can see, the list is long, and we do not have that much time. So I would remind everybody that the statement should not exceed 1 or 2 minutes. And I see the ambassador already at the podium. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, moderator. I would like to, at the outset, to wish welcome to the distinguished Minister of Foreign Affairs and Immigrants of the Republic of Lebanon, and also to the distinguished speakers from Germany and the World Bank. And also it was, I cannot but fully endorse what Minister Safadi has said, as well as what Minister Abu Habib just mentioned today. As they have said, well, like Jordan and Lebanon, Egypt is also among the main hosting countries of Syrian refugees in the region. In addition to Syrians, Egypt currently hosts more than 430,000 refugees and asylum seekers registered with UNHCR from 59 countries, in addition to 9 million migrants from 133 countries, the majority of which come from neighboring countries witnessing protracted crises and have been living in Egypt for decades, most of them in a refugee-like situation. The level of funding from UNHCR program in Egypt currently stands at 33%. Egypt chapter at the Syrian Refugee Response and Resilience Plan has been only financed at 11%, while only 34% of the funds allocated to Egypt within the Sudan Regional Refugee Response Plan have been met. These numbers, coupled with the low numbers of return to countries of origin and even lower numbers to third country solution, they raise many questions on the level of implementation of the global Compact on Refugees, as well as the reality of burden and responsibility sharing. In this regard, I would like to highlight 4 important elements. First, there is a critical need to accelerate international efforts implementing the GCR pertaining to assessing the cost of hosting, protecting and assisting refugees with a view to identify gaps in international cooperation and implementing the principle of burden and responsibility sharing in a more equitable and sustainable manner. Second, the disproportionate implementation of the objectives of the GCR, focusing on the integration of refugees and asylum seekers vis-à-vis other durable solutions, namely voluntary return and resettlement, would only contribute to increasing the pressure on host countries and exhaust their resources in a way that undermines their ability to protect refugees and provide them with the required support, increasing the fragility of refugees and their host communities alike. Third, there is a need to a more comprehensive approach in responding to new and protracted forced displacement situation that includes addressing the root causes of forced displacement in parallel to finding more durable and sustainable solutions to refugees and their hosting communities. Fourth, there is a significant role for the development actors and the private sector to play to alleviate the burdens of hosting countries, invest in the resilience capacities, as well as provide international complementary solutions for refugees and asylum seekers in protracted situations. Let me just end by referring to Gaza. Gaza is a very dangerous humanitarian situation. It is an abomination for the conscience of the international community. We have all condemned what happened to civilians, no matter where they are, and Palestinians are no less civilian than others, and they need the same protection, and 2 million people in Gaza should not be considered as collateral damage, nor should humanity be selective. If we are for a rule-based international system, well, this has to apply across the board. Otherwise, we are putting the seeds for the destruction of the very system we are trying to protect. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Mr. Koller? Mr. Koller, you have the floor.
And now the microphone works. There are many forgotten refugee crises in the world, but the crisis in the Middle East is by no means forgotten. I would like to mention this because obviously Minister Safadi and Buhabi, for good reasons, claimed international responsibility and international solidarity for the victims of the Syrian crisis, but the solidarity is there. Since the start of the crisis, and particularly since 2013, the European Union, in collaboration with its member states, has consistently been a lead contributor of humanitarian and resilience assistance for some of the most severe humanitarian displacement crises that are unfolding in the Middle East and Northern Africa, including in Syria and including in the occupied territories in Gaza and the West Bank. If I only take the Syrian crisis, you know that the European Union and the member states of the European Union, including Germany, and Deputy Minister Anne knows what I'm talking about, have mobilized more than 30 billion euros, not million. This support, as you probably all know, is covering all essential sectors: shelter, healthcare, education, food security, protection. And our action is also focused on resilience building, including livelihood support, vocational training, economic empowerment programs, drinking water, sewage, and so forth. This figure is complemented by our support to Syrian refugees in neighboring countries. For example, in Turkey, not only in Lebanon and in Jordan, as important as that is, where we have contributed 10 billion euros in development funding to support primarily Syrian refugees and host communities ever since the outbreak of the Syrian crisis. Going beyond the Syrian crisis, and it was mentioned, of course, here, we have been supporting consistently the Palestinians with humanitarian, with development assistance. And humanitarian assistance we have been mobilizing since the year 2000. After the outbreak of violence and the Hamas attacks of 7 October, we have mobilized already on the 2023 budget 100 million euros in humanitarian aid for Gaza alone. And as we are approaching the end of this year, we have already programmed 125 million for the new year for Gaza in humanitarian aid. We've also established an air bridge. Before I left for Geneva, we had already sent 25 planes. We have set up in El Arish, and thank you very much to Egypt for all the facilities that it has enabled there. We set up a humanitarian logistics hub, and we are very keen to extend our aid for the suffering population of Gaza. These are not the only crises in the Middle East. Of course, I could speak, if I had more speaking time, about Yemen, about Iraq, about the Sahrawis, where, again, the European Union is one of the major donors and provides clean water, sanitation, education, food, and healthcare in the Sahrawi refugee camps. Looking forward, I would like to state that we will come forward with a pledge through which we confirm our commitment to address the plights of the people who are suffering from the Syrian crisis, both in Syria and in neighboring countries. We're also going to organize, again, another Brussels conference, another Brussels pledging conference on Syria and the neighboring region. I would like to assure you that also in the new year, we will commit to sustaining humanitarian development aid at a level of about 6 billion euros only for next year. And we will certainly combine humanitarian and long-term resilience assistance, as we have done also after the earthquake earlier this year in Turkey and in Syria, in order to bolster infrastructure, relief, and socio-economic support. We will also, of course, provide protection to Syrian refugees and to those and help those who are displaced in Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan through resettlement and humanitarian admission. This stays a priority, a political, also a financial priority for our international action. And this is certainly an area where the European member states and the European institutions work very closely together in a Team Europe approach, because we have a very strong humanitarian cause here, but we also have very good political reasons to support the people in need. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Koller. We'll have Ms. Slente now. Just want to remind that the intervention should be short. We are supposed to finish at 3 o'clock, and at the rate at which we are going, we probably won't. Mrs. Slente, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to express the Danish Refugee Council's calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The situation for civilians in Gaza is extremely precarious. And there is a need for accountability for the violations of international humanitarian law that might have happened in the present conflict between Hamas and Israel. Now, the Danish Refugee Council works in several countries across the MENA region, supporting Syrian refugees as well as working in Syria itself. Many Syrian refugees, as we have been hearing here, have now been displaced for over a decade, presenting the need to adapt our approaches now to support the affected communities, including through development opportunities. We need to support the Syrian refugees with economic inclusion, because without access to a labor market, refugees are unlikely to achieve self-reliance, including making their own decisions and providing for themselves. This is why DRC is part of this multi-stakeholder pledge on economic inclusion and social protection, which we support through both traditional programs, but also innovative approaches. New funding is necessary and new sources of funding are necessary. So we use a number of different mechanisms to try to attract new and innovative funding. The refugees are concerned about the availability of decent work opportunities, and they feel challenged in joining the formal economy. They have ambitions, but they need our support. We see young people in the region who are creative, they are ambitious. Many want to become entrepreneurs, but the opportunities for decent work is limited, and they need support and they need coaching. We've been talking about the returns and the possibilities for people to return to Syria. I'd like to state that our view on this is that all return needs to be voluntary. That is a basic principle. We as an organization conduct assessments, analysis among the refugee population in the region. And what are the results of those interviews? It is actually, and we interview a vast number of people, people's aspirations are to go back to Syria. But the majority of people say the conditions are not ripe. And people state security concerns, access to their assets, and economic concerns for these reasons as reasons in that assessment. We need to work together, states, UN agencies, international financial institutions, and civil society to deliver on the ambitions of the refugees. So therefore, my question could be to the panelists. I don't know whether we have time to respond to that question now. How can you also as actors and state actors leverage multi-stakeholder collaboration to move towards economic inclusion for refugees in your countries or in the broader MENA region? And what support is needed from the UN, from INGOs and donor governments to ensure progress in that regard? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lente. Mrs. Barishi.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anam Barishi, and I'm the director of Jordan River Foundation. But today I'm actually quite honored to be representing the Civil Society Network for Displacement that is co-convened by UNHCR. This network consists of 28 members, and it has representatives from the civil society sector and also from the private sector, who really work hand in hand in order to enhance the socio-economic welfare of the refugee populations and host community members in Jordan. A year ago, the network decided to work together in order to maximize impact and really utilize the resources that are available in Jordan. And as His Excellency has mentioned earlier, there is a substantial reduction in the international funding, and therefore we decided as members to work together on a joint pledge. The pledge briefly focuses on enhancing the resilience and self-reliance of refugees and host community members by creating sustainable livelihood opportunities, providing education and health services, in addition to holistic protection services, by using an evidence-based approach in order to advocate for social justice and responsibility sharing through a collective multi-stakeholder approach. I know that I have 2 minutes only, but before I conclude, I'd like to share good news that as we speak right now, IKEA, in another side event, they've renewed their commitment and their pledge for the coming 4 years to create 400 new job opportunities in partnership with Jordan River Foundation, which falls beautifully under this pledge. So the matching has already started under the livelihood component. And I think this is also a very innovative idea and solution that His Excellency has mentioned, that we have to think out of the box and see how we can create partnerships, actually long-term partnerships with the private sector. So I would like to take this opportunity to urge the international community, the private sector representatives and donors to join us on this pledge and make a real difference in the lives of refugees and host community members in Jordan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Barishi. Mr. Al-Humaihi.
Honorable Excellencies, distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It gives me great pleasure to speak before you on this important occasion. It is also with a heavy heart that we convene today as devastating crises are unfolding before our eyes, especially the harrowing situation in Gaza being the center of it. Over the past decades, Qatar Charity has never lost sight of the plight of refugees, steadfast in its support to refugees and IDPs from Palestine, Syria, Yemen, Sudan, and Somalia, and many other countries, hand in hand with their generous host countries and different partners across borders and sectors. Cognizant that the only way to be truly effective in addressing multiple complex challenges of forced displacement is through multi-stakeholder and cross-sector partnerships with governments, NGOs, local actors, private sector, and local community. Reaffirming our commitment to the principles set forth in the Global Compact on Refugees, Qatar Charity pledges to support and address the needs of refugees in MENA in East Africa through financial, material, and technical assistance to ensure the provision of wash, health services, shelter, and economic opportunities, with a pledge of $100 million for the next year. $20 million will be for the current horrifying situation in Gaza. Of this pledge, we're contributing $3.8 million to reinforce our support to UNHCR and its crucial mandate to protect and assist refugees. We are also joining hands with the Islamic Development Bank with an additional pledge of $5 million to facilitate access to quality education and vocational training to refugees and IDPs and in host communities across many countries in the MENA. We also hope to continue the much-needed and immediate collective action to respond to the current ongoing crises in Gaza. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Al-Humaihi. Mr. Cardon.
Excellencies, distinguished guests and colleagues, thank you very much for giving us the floor. The ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, as most of you would know, has a solid experience in context in conflicts. It's been 160 years, and the vast majority of our operations are actually taking place in the Middle East and North Africa, including in Gaza, where colleagues are indeed facing unprecedented time, unprecedented challenges in the current circumstances. It's with this perspective that we wanted to share 3 points with you. We know from first-hand experience the critical impact of armed conflicts and its related humanitarian consequences, and this cannot be handled by one actor alone. In the Middle East and North Africa region, we have obviously many cases of protracted displacement where people cannot return to their homes for years. The ICRC has been operating in Iraq for 40 years, 60 years in Yemen, and more than 10 years in Syria. In these long-standing conflicts, we know that the spillover effects of armed conflicts and related humanitarian consequences in one country can exert enormous economic and social pressure on neighboring states. It was again confirmed today in the panel. The prolonged presence of large displaced population increase clearly the cost and requires additional infrastructure investment. These are facts that nobody can contest. Second, the ICRC acknowledged the solidarity and enormous efforts in neighboring host countries and the pressure on their public services. Therefore, our second message is to encourage all actors to look at long-term financial and programming support to these countries. With Syria, for example, it's essential to ensure self-reliance and dignified conditions for refugees and adequate support for host communities. Related to this, and the third and last message, is to reinforce the reality that short-term responses alone cannot tackle the long-term needs of displacement-affected individuals and communities. A dual approach of supporting basic needs and building resilience is essential. It requires a combination of structural and individual interventions. It also requires collaboration across government, donors, and the international community. Based on this, the ICRC direct experience in places such as Syria, Yemen, and Iraq are still challenged to address before large-scale sustainable returns can take place, even in areas where hostilities and violence has stopped. As we all know too well, war upturns lives long after guns have silenced. Many of us may feel hopeless these days and with the ongoing crisis we face, not only in the Middle East, but around the world. As we see it again, there's a clear need to work better together, to better coordinate, but let's also be very clear that even if donors and humanitarians can do a lot, there's still very much needed responsible and courageous political leadership needed. Otherwise, we will continue facing these challenges again and again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cardon. Mr. Abdullahi.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed great pleasure and honor to be with you in this important session. And I would like to thank UNHCR for organizing this important session. The issue of global refugees is a critical challenge that faces our member country. To give you the burden of our member country, 8 of the top 12 hosting countries are the Islamic Development Bank member countries. 3 countries of the Islamic Development member countries produce 70% of the global refugees. This is a challenge. That's why the strategy of the Islamic Development Bank is to support refugees and member countries who are generously hosting them through development programs and projects in various sectors to share the burden and responsibility. Our aim is to tackle poverty and building resilience to achieve long-term development programs that are really tackling the root causes of forced displacement, refugees, and other challenges. The bank also supports refugees and hosting countries through specifically designed flagship programs that are supporting livelihood development, education, and skills development programs for refugees. To give you few concrete examples of some of the interventions that we have recently carried out, in 2008, the bank has approved and implemented Syria education program, which has enabled over 2,000 young graduates from higher education to access digital skills and also entrepreneurship development. These refugees are generously hosted by Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, and Turkey. Building upon that successful implementation, we have expanded that program to support over 15 member countries, including 8 or 5 member countries from the MENA region. And we designed a program called STEP, which is a skills, training, and education program for young refugees and hosting communities. And the reason behind the STEP is we want to enable the STEP to access economic opportunities and create hope for the young refugees in our member countries. And I would like to thank our partners who have been contributing to this program, including Qatar Charity, Abdullah Noor Foundation of Kuwait, and also other important partners who have been playing instrumental to support this initiative. Finally, I would like to reiterate our commitment that ISDB will continue to forge close collaboration and partnership with key development partners and our member country governments and UN agencies to design initiatives that will help countries to manage the pressure and also challenge posed by this development challenge. This collective effort is designed to generate economic opportunities and contribute to have sustainable peace and development in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdullahi. We have now Mr. Yusuf.
Hello, everyone. I'd first like to thank UNHCR for allowing us this platform. I am Nouran Shamsi, speaking on behalf of the Big Heart Foundation. The Big Heart Foundation is a philanthropic foundation established by Her Highness Sheikha Jawahar al-Qasimi, wife of ruler of Sharjah and UNHCR's first eminent advocate for refugee children. Her Highness was appointed in 2013, and this year marked a decade of her service to refugee children across the globe. The Foundation's mandate is to protect and empower children and families in vulnerable situations across the world. Today, we have projects in over 30 countries and have supported over 3 million people across different sectors, including education, livelihoods, healthcare, and protection. Continuing this journey of support for refugees, the Foundation is pledging a minimum of $5 million towards multiple humanitarian projects supporting displaced communities. With over a decade of collaboration with UNHCR and other organizations supporting refugees across the world, the Big Heart Foundation hopes to continue working closely with refugee communities, empower solutions they develop, and providing support to partners that do the same. Our focus has been and continues to be supporting humanitarian development and sustainable projects with tangible impacts on the populations we serve. We look forward to continue this relationship we have developed with UNHCR and with other organizations, many of whom are present today, who have supported our work over the last 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Big Heart Foundation. Mr. Fouad?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. Actually, I'm here to represent a local research and policy network on displacement that get tremendous support from UNHCR, a group of NGOs, academicians, and civil society. And I would respect my role to read the pledge. Otherwise, I'd prefer to stay there listening and discuss the issue of, among many issues, some strange issues, including Syria is a safe place to return, and Syrians are labor migrant, and the other issue about that killing 6,000 or 8,000 children is a self-defense. Back to my pledge that I should read. So lack of documentation is a major barrier for many persons in Lebanon, such as refugees, migrant workers, displaced and stateless. They are estimated to be in thousands born in Lebanon who lack civil documents such as birth certificate that's fully registered, which are required in order to acquire or confirm their nationality and enjoy many rights such as freedom of movement and right to work. As civil society actors, NGOs, academics, and professionals based in Lebanon, the members of the Lebanese Policy and Research Network on Displacement pledge to work toward reducing the barriers to civil documentation in Lebanon by 1. Advocating for the enactment of modern and comprehensive universal civil registration law. 2. Providing guidance to those who need it on the appropriate procedures for acquiring documentation. 3rd, supporting the capacity of understaffed and under-resourced government offices to provide documents in a timely manner. 4, liaising with relevant government ministries to address systemic barriers such as requirement to obtain missing documents available only from the country of origin and or from the Lebanese related authorities. Through this support, we aim to reduce intensively the number of missing birth certificates among these vulnerable and marginalized population by the end of 2027. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fouad. Mr. Mohammed?
تحياتي لسعادتكم وللضيوف الكرام. اسمي محمد شريف، لاجئ سوري وعامل في المجال الإنساني في إقليم كردستان العراق. وأنا أيضا مؤسس ومدير منظمة هيتما للتنمية الثقافية والاجتماعية. أود في البداية أن أعرب عن شكري للحكومة العراقية وحكومة إقليم كردستان والمنظمات الإنسانية التي استقبلت ودعمت اللاجئين في العراق. وقد كنت جزءا من مجموعة الاستشارية الخاصة بالمجتمع المدني استعدادا لهذا المنتدى. أود أن أقدم لكم العهود التي قمنا بصياغتها نحن كمجموعة الاستشارية الخاصة بالمجتمع المدني وبالمشاورة مع مبعوثي الحكومة. دعم الحكومة من خلال مجموعة من الأنشطة التشاورية ورفع الوعي والمناصرة لصياغة وتنفيذ قانون جديد للاجئين والذي يتماشى مع المعايير الدولية. نأمل أن يساعد هذا القانون في إزالة القيود الحالية على تنقل اللاجئين وزيادة صلاحية تصاريح الإقامة القانونية. هذه الإجراءات ستدعم قدرة اللاجئين على الاعتماد على أنفسهم والمساهمة في الاقتصاد الإقليم والعراق. ثانيا، دعم الحكومة لتمكين اللاجئين من الوصول إلى الخدمات العامة وبشكل متساوي مع المجتمع المحلي من خلال تقديم برامج مستمرة في مجال المساعدة القانونية والخدمات الحماية المكملة. نتوقع التعامل مع التحديات المتعلقة بتنفيذ سياسة دمج تعليم اللاجئين مثل تعزيز بنية تحتية للتعليم ونقص اللوازم المدرسية والمعلمين وتسهيل تعديل شهادات التعليم للمعلمين اللاجئين وزيادة فرص تعليم اللغة المحلية للمعلمين والآباء والأطفال. الوصول المتساوي للخدمات القانونية وتحسين الإطار القانوني سيساعد في تسهيل حرية التنقل مما سيؤدي إلى زيادة فرص العمل للاجئين في الاقتصاد النظامي برواتب أفضل وتمكنهم من تأسيس شركاتهم الخاصة وتوفير وظائف وبالتالي المساهمة في ازدهار الاقتصاد المحلي. أحب أن أشير بأن ممثلة شبكة العيادات القانونية الأستاذة لبنى الوائلي سوف تتحدث عن تعهدات المجتمع المدني لاحقا. شكرا لك.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed. Catherine Hosborn.
Yes, so thank you very much. And obviously being the last speaker from the floor, and with so much already said, I'm going to be very quick. I hope our colleague from UNHCR will be happy with this. So first of all, just to say, UNDP co-leads the Regional Refugee and Resilience Plan with UNHCR since 2015, supporting economic empowerment and strengthening institutions to provide services for all. We've all noted the emergence of new crises and disasters that have led to increased vulnerabilities and instability from the region. And as also noted by many panelists, attention is shifting away from the Syria crisis, and the challenging funding landscape places a big burden on host governments, particularly around ensuring social and economic stability. Therefore, support to host governments remains essential. They require multi-year commitments from the international community, and the world is looking at governments and the international community in this region to work closer together to innovate and promote social, economic inclusion and resilience for all. At this juncture, we must work on coherence and nexus between HDP interventions from the outset of displacement situations, as called for in the recent multi-stakeholder pledge on HDP nexuses that was launched just recently, actually, at the preceding panels by the Government of Japan and UNDP. UNDP stands ready to support governments. This was our key institutional pledge at the Global Refugee Forum, from anticipation, promoting investments in economies, infrastructure and service delivery, mitigating social tensions, developing and supporting local and national development plans. And UNDP will continue to utilize our extensive networks and partnerships with IFIs, private sector, civil society, and donors towards this endeavour. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And since there will be an event starting in 3 minutes in this room, allow me to provide some concluding remarks on behalf of Jordan and ourselves. First, to thank all for very insightful intervention today. Countries within the MENA region have shown incredible hospitality for decades, yet they are facing socio-economic challenges impacting both refugees and host communities. Host governments at national, local level are providing access to public services, including housing, shelter, education, healthcare, water, and sanitation, and they are under pressure, as well as facing the impact of new conflicts in the region, economic challenges, and the compounding climate crisis. Ensuring sustained funding levels for the region is critical, pending durable solutions. There is no alternative to ensuring continued refugee protection and to support equitable responsibility sharing for host countries. Given the context we are living in today, we must increase investment in economic opportunities, education, and social protection for refugees and their host communities, especially for the most marginalized individuals. By strategically directing resources to create sustainable economic avenues, improve access to quality education, and strengthen social protection mechanisms, we can significantly contribute to poverty reduction. And this approach is key to breaking the cycle of poverty, empowering individuals, and ensuring that the most vulnerable are not left behind. It demonstrates a commitment to comprehensive, inclusive development strategies that uplift entire communities and promote resilience. Strengthening engagement through the humanitarian development and peace nexus is key. In times of multiple concurrent crises, the experience in the MENA region shows the importance of linking the humanitarian responses to more sustainable, resilience-based development for refugees and host communities. And for example, the protracted nature of the Syria crisis highlights the centrality of responsibility sharing, the need for innovative and inclusive policies, and the importance of pursuing sustainable solutions to crisis. The integration of peace-building efforts is crucial to address root causes in countries of origin, mitigate conflicts, and create environments conducive to durable solutions. Thank you for your participation, and especially those who have announced new GRF pledges. Thank you very much.
with